Welcome to episode 315, Game 7 edition of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet365. Our sports betting partner that's been with us all throughout the playoffs. And you can be getting all the news, analysis, lines, and betting options for the playoffs until tonight, when it's one game and we will finally know who wins the 2024 Stanley Cup. Will it be the Oilers or the Panthers? Find out, get all the odds, get all the in-game betting at Bet365. I'm Jason Greger alongside Frank Saravalli, as we are clearly in the same hotel, just in different rooms with the exact same background, which is weird. Frank, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, it's a little bit startling being so close to you to start a Monday, but it's all right. I'll take it. Game 7, because it's the Cup, whatever necessary.
Yeah. Best day of your life, buddy. Oof, you can feel it. You can sense it. It's good.
Is it the best day of my life? This is not the first or second Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final I've covered.
No. We'll get to Game 7 in a second, but I do want to start with, are you an Uber user?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've never had Uber on my phone. My wife had it, like when we go on trips, she has it. So I've ridden in it a few times, but I'll be honest, I'm kind of old school. I'm still a cab guy. I know that sounds really odd to a lot of people, and I get it. So I was lucky enough to get on a charter out of Edmonton to get here. So direct flight, thank goodness. And anyway, we land in we don't land in the airport. We land in the national jet is what it's called. Well, there's no cabs. So I have to download Uber on my phone, which took longer. So I get in the Uber. My first Uber experience in Florida, great. We go from the airport to the hotel, no problem. Well, we're staying at the same hotel. So last night, about 10 o'clock, I'm going to the elbow room. So I get in an Uber.
You left the hotel at 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like your dedication. Go ahead. Continue.
And well, by the time we had dinner and everything, whatever, we didn't land till I think 7, something like that. I didn't get back till 8, but anyway. So my driver's really nice, and I'm like, hey man, on the way there, because I heard the elbow room only takes cash. So I'm like, I got to get some cash. So just stop at a bank. I don't care, any bank on the way there. So he's like, yeah, we're driving. And dude, I don't know if he just forgot what we were doing. We're in the middle lane. All of a sudden he sees a bank on the right-hand side and he just cooks it over to the right. Meanwhile, there's a car beside us. That car's swerving around. We almost get hit. And I'm just like, what the is going on? So, and his reaction was, ooh, that was close. And I'm just like, holy. So I'm a little like, all right. Then on the way back from the bar, now it's 2 a.m, right? I get an Uber. I'm all responsible. I think my Uber driver fell asleep twice on the way back. At one point, we're stopped at a light and everybody's going and we're just sitting there and I'm in the back seat. I'm finally like, are we going to go? Oh, yeah, sorry. And he wasn't on his phone because I looked. It's no phone. Dude. And then he cuts over the same. I'm like, I think I might be retiring from Uber in only one day. I don't know what your experience is, but in Miami or Florida, Fort Lauderdale, it was not great.
Buddy, I've probably spent this is day 56 that I've been on the road. I can imagine. In the playoffs, and I've exclusively used Uber. I've probably spent a few $1,000s in Ubers this playoffs, and I've had no issues. In fact, I had such a pleasant Uber experience yesterday with a guy that moved here from Kosovo and spoke perfect English. He moved here 18 months ago and is waiting to bring his wife and daughter over. We had a very pleasant conversation.
Yeah, that was my first driver. Yeah, he was not from Kosovo.
Yeah, I've had no issues, so must just be you.
Yeah, dude. Seriously, I was like,
how many ways can we try and find to kill Gregor?
Yeah,
you're like the Oilers. You can't kill him.
And then my buddy's like, you get a rating, so make sure you tip. So I'm like, I don't know if he's pulling my leg.
You know the story from this combine, right? There was a team that was asking players what is your Uber rating in the draft combine this year?
Wow.
You didn't hear about that?
I did, but I didn't really get it because I don't have Uber. But now I get it. I guess I have a rating. I'd have to look. So.
Huh. So
now Ty was saying though
it was Utah that was asking teams
what's your
what's your Uber rating?
Don't you get
what is your Uber rating?
I don't know. I guess I'll look at my phone. Like I've only had 3 rides. It can't be like I would hope it's not bad. Like I don't mine is
man, I hope
5.
It is bad.
I think it's 5.0
for 3 rides.
I think so.
Anyway,
yeah.
I've had Uber for.
What's your rating?
I don't know, a long time, a decade now, at least a decade. My rating is 4.82.
Oh well, I'm a 5. So it's like show up on time. But Tyler's saying that you have to that they give you the rating. They rate you before the tip option. Is that true?
They can.
No, I still see. That's the thing.
So it's not dependent on getting a tip.
Oh, and I didn't.
I just find to me, I know you've been a cab guy forever. You mentioned this one episode a long time ago. Not only is this way more convenient, I love the idea that you don't have to worry about swiping your card or paying when you get out. Like you just open the door and get out and you're on with your day.
Yeah,
that's the best part.
It's true.
And not only that, but you don't have to tell them where you're going. You don't need directions. Like all they do is hit start. They swipe and hit start and then you're on your way.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true.
This is not paid advertisement. I just don't know how you never got to this point before. And when you go in a cab that it's any safer.
Well, I know that's the thing, but everybody told me how great Uber is, and I'm just saying my first nighttime experience was I'm like, oh, great, I'm gonna die at the at Game 7. That'll be fun.
Well, here's the other truth here. Had you not decided to go to Elbow Room and had you been a good boy last night and you stayed in your room and went to bed and prepped and got a great night's sleep for Game 7, you wouldn't have had this.
Dad, right? What are you, my wife? What the? Zip your lip over there. Oh,
I'm just throwing it out there.
Dude, I think I was actually doing work last night by getting a pulse. You know, you want to be feet on the ground. You don't just report. You don't just cover the cup from the media side. To me, you got to get inside with the fans and really get a sense of the pulse of what's happening. And it's there's a lot of excitement. I'll say, obviously, there's even quite a few Panther jerseys at the bar. Although I don't know how someone's wearing it. I'll say this. Anybody who's wearing their jersey during the day, even at nighttime, kudos to you. I don't know how you do it. Like in the humidity right now, like that's next level, man. You must either you don't sweat or you're just happy to have the grossest feeling jersey of all time.
Dude, I hate this place so much. It's so hot. It's so ridiculous. God.
It is hot. Like, so you know what? Like, I think my hair could grow here if I lived here all the time. Sadly.
Yeah, I doubt it. Let's not take a bridge too far.
Yeah. Now, hey, let's get to Game 7. This is obviously, you know what? It'll be the 18th Game 7 in Stanley Cup Finals history. One hasn't gone to overtime since 1954. There's only been 2, and Detroit actually has won both of them in 54 and 50. You know, first time since St. Louis won on the road in Boston. What's interesting, Frank, is out of the first 17, the road team has only won 5, but they've won the last 3. The Blues in 19, the Bruins in 2011, and the Penguins in 2009. I don't know about home and away if it matters that much. Do you see a team that you view as the favorite heading into tonight, and why?
Well, the easy answer would be the Oilers based on the quote momentum that they've had to force a Game 7. I'll say there's a few things that have happened that have surprised me. I was shocked at how bad the Panthers were in Game 6. I thought they were actually quite good in Game 5, and I thought if they replicated something close to that for Game 6 that they'd be fine. But it's almost like the puck dropped and they knew they were losing Game 6. I don't know why that was the case. Maybe the Oilers were just that much better. They seem to be doing everything that you shouldn't be doing. Overhandling pucks in your own end, not handling the forecheck well, giving up odd man rushes. It just game 6 was nightmare fuel for the Florida Panthers. That said, I tend to believe that, and this is my take for Game 7, in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the scoreboard and what happened in each of the first 6 games, it might as well be the board on the roulette wheel. It's just there to mindfuck you. And if you think that what happened in the first 6 games or what happened in any of the previous rolls has anything to do with what happens in Game 7, like, it really has no bearing. Like, all we're talking about here is one strong game by the Florida Panthers, and they win the Stanley Cup. I know we've said that for the last 3, but I refuse to believe that anything that the Oilers have done to get to Game 7 has any bearing on the result. It really, we're another 3 days away. We are a lifetime of regret away from the Panthers. I take myself back to 2019. What was the feeling in the morning of the morning skate when the Blues were facing the Bruins? Everyone was saying there's no chance the Blues win this game on Bruins ice after having a lead in the series and not being able to close it out.
Yeah.
That was the feeling at the morning skate. That's what every media person was talking about. I was there. I saw the coverage. I was part of the coverage. That's the feeling that everyone has now, is there's no way the Panthers are going to win this game after gagging on a 3-0 lead.
Yeah. And I understand that, but I agree with you about, the past is the past. The only thing I think when I look at it from a game perspective is Florida going to be able, can they slow the game down a little bit? I know Paul Maurice talked about after Game 6 how he feels they need to play quicker. They haven't played with enough pace. They're skating into corners and they're everything's stopping. And really, so give the Oilers credit, obviously, that they've been able to angle them and box them out and all that stuff. I wonder, Frank, the ice conditions with it's so hot here. It's summer solstice, for goodness sakes, and it's humid as hell. And I wonder about ice conditions.
It's never been a problem, really.
Like Game 5, the ice didn't look great. Edmonton is the faster of the two teams. I don't think there's much debate about that. NHL Edge, you can look it up. It shows there. But I think, to me, the big question is Edmonton won Game 6. You talked about nightmare fuel. Edmonton won Game 6, and Connor McDavid really didn't have to do anything for them to win Game 6, right? He was all world in Game 5. In Game 4, when they scored 8, he got going in the final 5 goals. But it's hard for me to think that Connor McDavid isn't going to be much more of a factor tonight. Not that he played poorly in Game 6, but he didn't have a shot. He didn't get a point, and Edmonton still won.
That's the best thing going for Edmonton,
yes,
is that he wasn't.
I agree,
a factor.
100%. And obviously he'll probably see Barkov a lot tonight, and Gustav Forsberg and Ekblad, like we've seen in the series the whole time. And it's, to me, it's going to be fascinating to see how. And the last time he had 4 points in Florida, so that didn't bother him. To me, that's the storyline. Really, it might be too simple to look at it. And Edmonton has got 13 goal scorers in the series, and Bouchard and Draisaitl aren't one of them. So their depth has not been an issue. But I think in a one game off, when you have the best player, if the best player is noticeable, you got a significant advantage when the game begins.
I agree. And that's actually why, if you rewind, God, we've been at this Cup final so long now. I'm trying to think back to the episode. You'd have to go back to June 6th. That was our last DFO rundown before the series started. And I said, I have to pick the Oilers because I refuse in an elimination game to pick against Connor McDavid. I just think the best players on planet Earth find a way to get their fingerprints on the game when it matters most. And that's not to say that Barkov is a slouch or anything like that. And obviously Sergei Bobrovsky could have a lot to say about this game. I thought it was fascinating that Florida gave him the day off. I think that's been
what do you make of that?
I think that's been their biggest worry the whole time, is that this is a guy that, for as good as he is, This has been an incredible, the Stanley Cup final. We talked about this before the playoffs started. It's a lot for one goaltender to play every game for a 24-game stretch. It's a lot to ask. And they believe, or I think they believe, that there's a chance that you wilt down the stretch. That's what they think happened to him last year in the Cup final. .844 save percentage. Now, maybe Vegas was just significantly better at the time because Florida was so banged up, but I think they felt like he ran out of gas. And so to give him the day off, I wasn't shocked to see it because I was saying that's exactly what they're feeling internally now.
Yeah, it is. At this point, like, we watch those practices, Frank. They're a skate. It's not like there's anything in depth. It's not intense. Like, you're not going to wear your legs out before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. So, him not skating, he'll probably go out.
Goalies are different, though. There's no way to really take time off in a skate. Like, you can't just
it's probably good
your
for
way
him.
through a practice if you're a goalie.
Yeah,
and
no, that's fair.
The only reason I said that is because if you watched, and I saw a bunch of video from practice on Sunday in Florida, like, Kane is going through the motions because he knows he's a placeholder. He's not playing in Game 7.
Yeah, that's not a shock, right? Yeah, he's just out there. Frank, let's be honest. When he's 100% healthy, he's not. He's a guy who doesn't love practice anyway. So, if he's not playing, it's probably even more obvious in the effort for him. But it's the Bobrovsky storyline is one thing for the goalies, and goalies obviously play a huge part in Game 7. It's just usually it's massive a part of the game. You have Stuart Skinner on the other side, Frank, who is only in his second season. He's playing in a hockey mad market where lots of people have questioned him. You know what? He sat out games 4 and 5 in the second round against Vancouver after struggling in the first 3 games of that series. And since coming back, man, he's in the games where, if we think that, hey, the games matter and where you can clinch a series, game 4, 5, 6, and 7, for him to be 10-0 with a .943 and a 1.4 goals against average, he has really solidified himself late in series. And I look at kind of like the Skinner Bobrovsky right now. When you look at it, do you see an advantage either way heading into Game 7 for goaltenders?
I never thought I'd be saying this, but I do see an advantage for Skinner because that's how poor I think Bobrovsky has been over the last 3 games. I mean, ever since they've had a chance to clinch the cup, Bobrovsky hasn't been able to get his head screwed on straight. I mentioned the stat before, but they scored on 11 goals on a 35-shot stretch from game 3 to 5. He was no better in Game 6. Not to say he was awful, but he certainly wasn't lights out. Like, he gets the Hyman breakaway. There was nothing fancy about that. I look at it and that looks like a guy, either he's tired or he's struggling under the weight of the Stanley Cup, which is, guess what? That's the other component of Game 7 that the Oilers are going to have to deal with for the first time. Before, it was the pressure of, hey, you lose, your season's over. Ask the Florida Panthers how difficult it is knowing that for the first time in this series, you have the chance to get your name on the Stanley Cup. That's a whole different thing.
Oh, I had breakfast with Craig Simpson before Game 6 and or lunch, whatever it was. And I was just asking about the series. He goes, you know what? He thought Edmonton would win Game 6. He says, but then, the momentum advantage that people think about, he thinks it gets negated a bit because this morning the players wake up, and for the first time for all of them except 5, and even those 5, right, they haven't won lately, right? Like, Corey Perry won in 2007. Henrique's never won. Janmark hasn't won. Kulak hasn't won. And Ekholm. And now all of a sudden they wake up and it's like, hey, I can win the cup today. And he says it's hard to put into words. You try to block it out, but it's impossible. I mean, it's something you've wanted your whole life. As a young kid, you fantasize, you dreamt about it. And now to have it happen, he says, it is a big load. Some guys can really handle it, but some guys, you notice it at times. And it's more so how it mentally can tire you out, Frank. Like, you try to have a nap and suddenly you can't nap because you're just too excited. And you're laying there this afternoon and you're like, go to sleep. I got a game. But, so it is the human element, I think, is something you can't overlook for a game 7 now. Maybe that evens it out a bit.
I'm with you. So to go back to my roulette motif, I think this is an entirely new spin that is not predicated at all on the first 6, but I think will be heavily weighted. The result will be heavily weighted to whoever scores the first goal. If it's the Oilers,
right.
you might see the Florida Panthers fold like a cheap tent in a soft wind. You might. I'm not saying they will. You could, because at some point, and I've seen this on social media, their fans are already turning against them. Their actual fans are saying this team is an embarrassment. Up 3-0, can't get the job done. So, but if it's the Panthers, it's going to be the first real pushback we've seen since game 5.
Yep.
And even then, that didn't end well for the Panthers. So honestly, I got to tell you, so I told you I've covered a couple game 7s for the Cup before. There's nothing quite like it, but this is the most anticipated game that I've been at in my career. And by the way, I've also covered there's only been 4 in league history. I was at all 7 games of one of the 4 comebacks from 3-0 down. Flyers Bruins 2010. And that game, that's the best game I've ever seen live. Game 7, after down 3-0 in the series, you battle all the way back. The Flyers were down 3-0 in the first period of game 7 on the road. And they won that game. Insane. Absolutely insane.
Well, you look at every game in this series, the team who scored first has won except game 2. So, you know what? Your thought about scoring first is huge. I think the average goal in the first period is something like 8:50. I got to look it up again, but it's in it averages that we get a goal in the first 8 minutes of the period. It's been we haven't had a scoreless first period yet in the series. So, you know what? It's going to be wild. It's going to be fun. There's nerves and excitement. And you know what? You got 2 franchises, Frank. Florida's never won the Cup. Edmonton hasn't won the Cup since 1990. And so basically, any of their fans
before Florida existed.
Yes. Any of their fans really under the age of 45 probably don't really remember a Stanley Cup, right? And that's a significant portion of your fan base, right? So that's for both teams, right? Panther fans who've been there since day one. You know what? I guess maybe if you're 10, that's 40 years. Maybe you probably remember when you're 10, but I don't know if they remember year 1 or not. But they probably remember 96, and obviously they remember last year. So if you're 10, but to me that's fascinating. Is the what's on the line here? You're going to have a fan base that's is able to, I think, rip off a few of the scar tissue from the past and finally say, okay, you know what? It was worth it. The last 30 years, or in the case of Edmonton, the last 34, it's all worth it now for me if you're a fan, right? That's how they view it. All that pain, and because both of these teams, Frank, had long stretches where they weren't good, right? It's not like they've been pretty competitive for the whole time. Not the case here in the night since the Oilers won the Cup, 91 on, and the Panthers since they came in the league in 1993, 94. There's been a lot of lean years. So it's I'm kind of fascinated to see what the reaction will be. I know the players don't necessarily feel that as much, but the fans do.
So, I mean, it's difficult to predict, obviously, which way this is going to go, but we know what the legacy will be if the Oilers win. It's going to be one of the best playoff runs by any individual ever. And I think back to the clip that's been floating around, the conversation between Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid about, you will eventually lift this trophy someday. And he talked about what it means to win in Edmonton. But what happens if the Panthers lose? What will be said and written about Paul Maurice? 3rd trip to the Stanley Cup Finals, 2nd most games coached in NHL history without a Stanley Cup, 2nd most games ever. What will be said and written about this Panthers team that just they choked?
Well, yeah, it would be, you know what? Obviously, it would be, well, the hardest loss. As much as you talk about, you know, and I would agree with you, is this would be the, you know, the biggest win in modern sports history in North America, biggest comeback ever. Not biggest win, biggest comeback. And the other side is Florida would be the team that's, you know, the biggest gag job, the biggest choke job, if you want to use those terms. And yeah, I think that there's lots of pressure there. And, you know, when I look at Paul Maurice, he's had an unbelievable career. And, you know, of course he wants to win. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, like I don't know, as a coach, lots of coaches have told me come playoff time, you know, like you get your systemic stuff around and that's great. But, you know, at the end of the day, so much of it is on the players, right? Like you can have the best system idea, but they still got to implement it. They got to be the ones making the split second decisions. And I'm sure it's extremely difficult. Like I talk to fans and they're like, oh, it's so hard when you really don't have any input in it and you don't have any say. So they get nervous on both sides. And even as a coach, to an extent, the farther you are from the ice, I think the more nerve-wracking it is, right? GMs, it's way worse, right? Like the Bill Zito memes, oh my goodness, some of them are hilarious right now. Of him throwing the water bottle and stuff that people make up. Like obviously there's,
and what is it? What is it? What does that even mean? Like I know it's gone around and it's people have said, oh, this is signs of the Panthers cracking. I'm like, put yourself in his shoes. If I were in his shoes, I'd be throwing a lot more than a water bottle.
Yeah, and he's frustrated. Like I don't think him showing true emotion and showing disappointment doesn't mean you're rattled. It means you're human. Like, yeah, he could be calm all the rest of the time. By the time he takes the elevator down to the room, he's like, serenity now. He's counted to 10. Like, you know, he had 1 second of action because look at him up until that point.
It was an empty water bottle.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. So, but but the internet's supposed to have fun with it, as they do. But yeah, I don't. You know, it's a great question, Frank, on how, you know, Paul Maurice. It would be a tough thing to live with for sure, because if Edmonton loses, even though they lose the cup final, there's good. Yeah, but they made it to game 7, right? Like it's not going to be looked upon. Although I will say this, and this is where I look at a guy like Connor McDavid. So if they don't win, people are going to say, see, he can't win the big game. And I'm like, the guy scored 42 points in the playoffs. He set the all-time assist record. And so let's say they lose, Frank, in, 2-1. You tell me like 1 goal game suddenly will change how some people view a player historically. I always find that odd to me.
I do too. There's so many different storylines. Some of them are just absolute BS. And some of them make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I can't think of a more anticipated game that I've ever gone to. So I can't wait. Let's go.
Yeah, I would agree.
Can't wait to
the storylines leading up to it, the comeback, the farthest distance between two teams, McDavid.
Yeah, do you know how many
breaking records?
Speaking of Uber, do you know how many miles I've flown during the Stanley Cup final? 31,406.
How many flight delays have you had?
One trip around the globe is 25,000 miles. So I've circumnavigated the globe just on this trip.
Fun.
People say, how's that possible? Well, add in a couple connections. Trust me, it's possible.
And how many delayed flights have you had out of that?
In this cup final, I have had, I think, 2.
But just throughout the playoffs, maybe.
Throughout the playoffs, I've had maybe like 5, but they just haven't been like short ones. They've been crippling ones.
Like
I've had a couple overnights in places that I wasn't expecting.
Oh, yikes. Tough. Yeah. Well,
but you know what? I hate, this is just a pet peeve. I hate anyone that freaking tweets about any of their travel issues. Like, Jay, every single day the sun rises and billions of people around the world go to work. Sports writers and media people tweeting about their plane problems or what they're doing. And it's not a shot at Tyler. It's just in general. No one else wakes up and feels the need to tell you how they got to work that day. No one, like literally no one. We are playing the world's tiniest violin for you, anyone that bitches about their flight being delayed or canceled or whatever their issue is. We don't care.
And everybody's lived it. Like, I don't know any human being who flies who's never had a flight delay, flight canceled, tough flight, tough turbulence, or maybe that person who sits beside you on the plane and you're like Serenity now. Like, I don't know anybody who's like, hey, how's your flight history? Oh, it's unbelievable, man. Every flight I've ever been on. Now, maybe if all they do is charter their own flights and they, like 12 people in a flight and they know everybody, I guess those people, but I highly doubt they just got to start getting own private jets from day one. Everybody's had a time in their life where flying is less than desirable, but still, it's always better than the alternative, driving.
I look, we're standing there at the gate last night. So I'm coming down to Florida. I stopped home for one day. It was my son's birthday yesterday. Stopped home for a day. I get the last flight from Philly to Miami. We're standing at the gate. There's a thunderstorm. The ramp is closed because they can't load and unload bags or passengers while there's a thunderstorm. And we're standing there waiting for them to reopen it so that we can board the flight. And the guy next to me, we're only delayed 1 hour. And this is his last flight of the day. It's mine. And he looks at me and goes, this is an utter disaster. And I'm like, we're delayed 1 hour, bro. We're going to make it there. The pilots are there waiting. Like, we'll be good. So even if it takes 3 extra hours or 4 extra hours, by the time I got to my hotel, it was almost 3. It's just, that's what happens. Like, sometimes that happens. It's okay. Like, we'll all make it.
Yeah, 100%. So it's going to be fascinating, man. Everybody, I think, is anticipating Game 7 tonight. If you're a fan of hockey, it'll be great. Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk for buy or sell. Ty, how you doing?
What's up, boys? I'm doing good. And Frank, I think some people did care about my travel day yesterday. People were interacting with it. It was good content.
No, they didn't. No. And no one feels bad for you. They don't.
All righty then. Jeez. Let's get into buy or sell, I guess. Brought to you by Wendy's. They only ever use fresh, never frozen Canadian beef in all of their burgers. Download the Wendy's app today to check out the latest deals. First one I got for you guys. We're going away from the Cup final for this segment. I'm going to say this. The Flyers should be speeding up their rebuild a little bit here now that Matvei Michkov is coming over. Buy or sell, Frank? Michkov on the ELC could be a big advantage. They were decent last year. Get aggressive.
Let's see what he is first. And not that what he is in year one is going to be the determinant of what he's ultimately going to be. And I have no doubt that he could be a special player. But first off, they already kind of like tried to be competitive last year. Like, I've said it before, and this isn't me being critical, and I use this phrase already so far in this pod, so forgive me, but last season should be nightmare fuel for the Flyers. They were entering the year a rebuild team, a team rebuilding, and they missed the playoffs after being in a playoff spot almost the entire year. And now your reward for that is no man's land in the NHL, picking 12th overall. I've said forever, John Tortorella is the worst coach possible for this team, and it's not because he's not a good coach. It's because he squeezes every drop out of this team and the players he's given, and they get close to making the playoffs because they have no business being in the playoffs. Next season, they've got a bunch of dead cap space. They could be executing a couple buyouts this summer. Cam Atkinson's still a possibility. Cal Peterson is a possibility. They're trying to, they'd love to unload those books. They've got the most money spent on the cap of any team because they've taken on bad contracts. It's great to get him under team control, mostly because it's Russia and you never really know what the hell could happen. But I would say in general, pump the brakes on everything, and the Flyers are still a long way off from getting to where they want to get to.
So you're selling, you're saying wait and see a little bit. Yeah. Greg's?
That's what I would do. I would let's say you want to speed it up. Where would you even start? Where can you like? So you have one difference maker, maybe two if you include Konechny. Where are your other difference makers? You're going to include Drysdale. You're going to include who? Do you have the goaltending necessary? Fedotov and Ersson? Like they're many multiple pieces away from being just a contending team, let alone a playoff team.
Yeah, I'm selling all day long. You try to you can't speed up reality, and this is one player. And by the way, when the season begins, he's a teenager, and NHL success rarely go together. Significant success for teenagers. It's his first year here. Now he'll turn 20 in December, so late birthday, that helps him a bit. But I can tell you, we can go through the list of guys who are now star players in the league who weren't good enough to be teenagers in the NHL. So Flyers, and don't get sucked into thinking a young player is going to come over and suddenly you're going to be that much better. If anything, they just look at Michkov and be like, hey, you know what? His ELC is great, but who's on their ELC in Edmonton and Florida? Right? Who was on their ELC that was an impact player in Vegas? Who was an impact player on their ELC in Tampa or Colorado? Like, I don't.
Well, Tampa, there was always guys. There was Ross Colton, and before that, it was
depth guy.
Gord
was finishing off. Guy. Like, they're not leading the team.
No, but the point is, you need those guys to fill out your roster, and I am a believer in that, and that is a real thing. So,
yeah, but they're the last piece of they're not the main. Like Dylan Holloway and Broberger last year of their ELCs. Really good players. They've come in, they play great minutes. But if you went down the list on pecking order, if you're listing the most important players in the orders, right, you get to probably 10 for Broberg, maybe a little bit higher how he's come in and because of the minutes he plays. But that's my point. Like this guy, he should be the complimentary guy after you have the top 5 guys. And they don't have top 5 guys if you think you're a playoff contending team.
All right, moving on from this one, let's go. Let's talk a little free agency here for a second. Actually, in Patrick Kane's situation, there's been some rumblings around about what he could potentially do. Are you buying or selling on Kane being a Red Wing again next season, Greggs?
Well, I'm probably going to sell because I'm like, if he's going to be a Red Wing, why wouldn't he already sign with them? Like that's the one team that can negotiate with them. So now maybe they will. We've seen it, guys that have, but not necessarily bigger name players. But Stamkos a few years ago did go right down the wire and then signed right the last minute. That's fine, and maybe does it again this year with Tampa. But I don't know. I kind of I sense I look at Detroit. They're a playoff cusp team, right? We talked about them making the playoffs for a few years or being in the hunt, and they've been in the hunt, but they've come up short every time. So are they going to take a significant jump this year? I don't know. I think Showtime and the Rangers just still makes a lot of sense for me. And there's a few other teams that might be higher in the pecking order that for him. Like, I don't know. I never rule out Vegas. I'm sorry. I don't rule out Vegas for any team. Like they find ways to get guys in. I know they got some cap issues, but whatever. So I still, I'll say I will sell on him signing in Detroit.
Yeah, I'm selling all day long. I think once the season ended, I think they kind of knew that it wasn't going to happen. That said, I still think the Red Wings are trying to keep other players that are pending free agents. Like I think they're working on David Perron. They're working on Shane Gostisbehere. So those are all still strong possibilities. But going back to Kane and the Rangers, I mentioned this last week on Morning Cup of Hockey, which I think is where it started. There was a feeling even when Kane was getting close to signing this past season that there was some unfinished business for him. And, they were one of the teams that was certainly in the mix for Kane. The Rangers simply couldn't offer him as much money as the Red Wings. And not to say he took the money, but that was the strongest deal that was on the table, I think, maybe outside of Buffalo. So I think he left New York after the trade deadline and felt like, man, I really wish I was healthy and had a chance to show what I could do. And then now you see the Rangers, they're always aggressive. Chris Drury and that staff, their posture is always, hey, what can we do to get better? How, what can we bring in? And look, Kane played at a near point per game pace. I think he's going to be even better next year after the first full summer of training in a long time. And you see them clear out Barclay Goodrow's contract, get it off the books cleanly. They're going after someone. It's just a matter of is Kane going to be the guy that they land? But I could see Kane being a fit in a whole bunch of places. Like, tell me that Kane wouldn't look great in a Dallas Stars uniform replacing Joe Pavelski. Tell me Kane wouldn't look great in a Colorado Avalanche uniform, replacing whoever. I mean, there's tons of possibilities.
What's his AAV?
I would feel very comfortable signing Patrick Kane to a 3-year times $5 million deal.
Oh yeah. I think that could be a bargain.
What I think he wants a little bit of security in term. Like, I don't think it's not that he's hurting for money. I think he wants to settle down with his family and get a place somewhere so that he knows he's going to be there for a little bit, as opposed to just a short-term 1-year thing where you continue to bounce around.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think he's gonna be one of those value contracts for sure.
All right, there you go, boys. Oh no, I have one more. I forgot about it. Leafs goaltending. There you go. That was what I had written down. We've heard some rumblings. Maybe they were in on Jacob Markstrom. Buy or sell on the Leafs getting one of the big name goalies on the market. Frank, your turn. You're going first.
I'm gonna sell, and I'm gonna say they go in a different direction. And if I were to make a projection, I would say Laurent Brossoit. He quietly had a really strong year for Winnipeg, although I think those numbers are a bit skewed because they defended so well and didn't give up a ton. Nonetheless, still, I think a talented guy who could probably do a little bit more. He's never been anything other than a career backup. But if you're a believer in Joe Woll and his talent, which I am, and you think that he has a chance to stay healthy, which anyone should heading into a season, I could see the thought process and play to go after someone like Brossoit. My only question mark is, if you look in the history of Brad Treliving, he's pretty much almost always gone after a big name goalie. Like, he was the guy that brought in Markstrom. So Ullmark, don't know where he's going to end up. Maybe Philip Gustafsson makes some sense. We have Merzlikins. That doesn't make any sense with the Leafs cap. Saros, unless you're pulling off a Mitch Marner transaction, which I guess is possible, but then you need to pay. Like, I just don't see the Leafs giving $10 million to a goalie or anywhere close to it. They can't. I don't think. I mean, they could if they swapped him 1-for-1 for Marner, but is that really the best way to do it? So that's why I checked down to Brossoit. That's my thought process.
I'm gonna sell on the. I agree about Brad Treliving and them wanting a big name goalie, but if they're very high on Woll, I think they need a veteran who they feel can play 40 games, because until Woll shows you he can stay healthy, that's going to be a question. So you have to me, be prepared for it and say, okay, we don't want a guy who can play 20 games. We want a guy who can play 40 if needed and be comfortable and consistent in 40 games. And that's who I think they're going to look for. I think they're probably, try to allocate money elsewhere to improve their back end and change the dynamics a little bit of their forward group.
Fair enough. All right, boys, there you go. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Wendy's.
A few other names, Frank, because it's such a crazy week. We're talking Game 7 tonight. It's June 24th, and we have the NHL awards in 2 days. You have the draft in 4 days, rounds 1 and 2, and then free agency is a week today, right? So you have all these RFAs who need to get their qualifying offers done later this week and finalized, and teams are sitting there waiting. It's obviously not going to be announced today because it's Game 7, but that'll come out later this week. It's going to be a flurry of news. One guy who's maybe not a huge name, but it's a very interesting story is in Winnipeg. What do you make of the whole Rutger McGroarty situation?
You look at it, and the first thing I think of is, who is Rutger McGroarty's best friend? And the answer is Cutter Gauthier. Those two guys are incredibly tight. You saw Cutter Gauthier force his way out of Philadelphia, not even really taking a meeting with their player development people, no one from their management staff. He says, I'm not signing in Philadelphia under any circumstances, gets traded to Anaheim. The season ends at Michigan. It's his second season. He had a fantastic year, unbelievable year, and was a force at the World Juniors. And he tells the Jets, I'm coming back to Michigan for my junior year. His plan was always dead set on going to Michigan. I think the Jets are uncomfortable with that, and I don't know if he's quite signaled to them that he won't sign there, which is a possibility. But nonetheless, everyone's uncomfortable with how this is playing out to this point. And he is now, since he is playing his junior year, is one more full season from being a total unrestricted free agent. A reminder for people that don't know the ins and outs of the CBA. If you play, you get drafted before your college experience, you play all 4 years. The August after you graduate and are no longer a college hockey player, you are a total unrestricted free agent August 15th and can sign anywhere you want. That's your right. So you can outlast the draft process. And that's, you start to get closer, and teams really don't like the feel of that. So no. I don't know specifically whether it's McGroarty saying, I'm not signing in Winnipeg, which is possible, or whether it's just the Jets saying, hey, we are uncomfortable and it's unclear if he's going to sign in Winnipeg. Let's move on. Either way, I understand where they're at. This guy was the 14th overall pick, and this is a blue chip prospect for them. He had 52 points in 36 games at Michigan. But the first thing my mind went to was Cutter Gauthier.
Well, that would make sense. So lots of times when we see this, the player ends up getting traded. Like, what's his trade value? Like, what's Winnipeg going to be getting here? Because teams have now, if teams want to get him sooner, like if you traded him, do you think he could be traded at the draft rank and then opt out and come to the NHL in the fall?
No, I think he's going back to Michigan either way.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it was about, hey, I don't like the Jets and I'm not signing. I think it was, hey, I'd like to go back for my junior year. I don't know if he believed he was ready yet.
Yeah, which is smart. But you know what?
Teams always put the full court pressure on when you get to your junior year, because they're like, oh my God, now if he gets to the end of this, he's only one more year away. And what are we going to do? They always try super hard for a guy after his sophomore year. Even if he's not ready, they're like, hey, we'll put him in the AHL. At least we got him.
Yeah. Which I know it's kind of narrow-minded. I'm like, you're still 2 years really is when you look at it. Like, wouldn't be worried about it, but it is an interesting name that's popped up here, and he's something you watch for leading up to the draft, and because it's one of the times where there's significant trades can maybe be made on the Friday and lots of times on the Saturday. So we'll see. Frank, we will see you at the rink very soon for Game 7. And what's your prediction? Who is hoisting the cup tonight?
I'm going to go Oilers, and I think if they score first, I think it could be a bit of a lopsided game. Ooh. I'm going to say Oilers 4-1.
4-1. All right. I have Edmonton. I'll stick with them. That's who I picked at the start of the playoffs. So I will say Edmonton 3-2. I think it's going to be a nail biter. It's going to remove some years for some of those pacing fans and nervous fans. And man, there's lots of them out there. It's so funny. It's the one thing. I've met a lot of different fans. I talked to some guys in Florida last night and some Oilers fans, obviously on the plane ride. And it's you kind of forget just what it means to the fans. How much the team means to them, and some of them have some really quirky superstitions and different things. And, there's always one in the group who's like, oh my God, like it's just so hard to watch. So it'll be fun and probably a little nerve wracking. It would be unreal if we saw an overtime game, but history tells us it's very unlikely. So enjoy it.
We haven't seen one in the series, and I hope there isn't one.
Touche. Well, everybody, good luck. Enjoy it as a fan. That was the rundown brought to you by our title sponsor, Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. Open an account at Bet365 today and use the promo code DAILY365 to bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the sport, whatever the moment, including Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. It's never ordinary at Bet365. We'll talk to you about the draft and the 2024 champion on Thursday.